Joe Rogan and Jesse Michaels just met for a podcast and discussed the truth behind the Bob Lazar story? Take a look, and as always, let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
You were talking about John Lear and John Lear's connection to Bob Lazar and the possibility that Lear was spreading disinformation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I've, by the way, since making that video, I've become more positive on Lazar, just insofar as I think he was at S4 Area 51. And there's going to be a great documentary coming out by my buddy Luigi on this called Project Gravatar. And I think there's going to be a lot of corroborating evidence that he was at least there, and a lot in his story checks. But I think you have to view, and I even say that in this video, that I think a lot of this story could be true. You can't, I think, view the Bob Lazar story, you can't just take it at face value, because John Lear and he were friends. John Lear is this babbling UFO nut. He's obsessed with UFOs. He's writing weird, like, disinfo-y style stuff with Bill Cooper, Behold the Pale Horse guy.
Which is a wild book.
Yeah. And so he's crazy. Bill Cooper.
Doesn't he talk about bases on the moon?
He talks about bases on the moon. Lear also talked about a soul catcher that like controlled our souls on the moon.
Oh boy.
And so Lear was like flooding the zone with all sorts of weird shit. Lear comes from an interesting family.
Right.
His father is Bill Lear, who's the autopilot wizard. He created the first business, basically the first private jet, the Learjet, in the 50s and 60s, and was an associate of a guy I hope we talk about named Thomas Townsend Brown.
Yeah.
And so I think, Lear was engaging in all sorts of bullshit. Was he a useful idiot, or was he a sophisticated agent provocateur? I'm totally open to him having been a useful idiot. In fact, there is a video of him saying, I was told, I was given all the Bob Lazar files or whatever, and I was told about, to actually, like, he said a guy named Admiral McClellan knew that I ran my mouth. I even have this video actually on the doc that I sent you, Jamie. He says, knew that I ran my mouth. So that's why we got Bob a job or whatever. And we knew that part of this stuff would leak. And it was like this limited hangout strategy on behalf of this guy named Admiral McClellan or whatever. And he was this useful idiot to sort of get it out. And I think
For what purpose?
Recruiting. You give people high level. Yeah.
Here.
And the MJ personnel, the original 12, have all passed away. So they get different people into these positions of MJ 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and taken over. It's degraded, so it's almost political now instead of like it was when Truman originally formed the MJ-12. It turns out that MJ-1, the head of MJ-12, is a guy named Admiral Mike McClellan. He wanted to get some of the information out because he didn't want to. He thought that some of this information should be out in the public. We don't need to keep all this secrecy. So he decided trying to figure out a way to get it to the public. So he knew that I was a blabbermouth and I would tell anything I knew. They investigated Bob Lazar, and they knew that he was a genius, but that he had a background such that they could instantly discredit him. They removed all his records from MIT, from Caltech, so he couldn't prove anything. He'd go back to Caltech, no, I don't see any records here. And, well, I was here. Well, no, you weren't. And he also, up in Reno at one time, he ran a cat house there. I forget what the name of the honeysuckle ranch it was. So they chose him because not only could he probably help them because he was so smart, and as a matter of fact, he's the one that named ununpennium 115. He's the one that told them what that was, and they didn't know when he went there. They didn't know what it was. He was the one that told them that's element 115, and then told them why and how he'd figured it out. But they decided to pick on Bob to go up there to work at S4 because they knew that Bob would tell me instantly, and then I would blab the whole thing. And that was their modus operandi, was to get the information out and gauge what it did to the public, how they accepted it, and then pull back and say, oh, no, it was all a mistake. Bob Lazar a fraud. He never worked here. He doesn't have any credentials like that. And they could back away and get out of it. So that was what Mike McClellan, Mike McClellan, came up with.
Isn't that crazy? Weird. And to me,
Kind of makes sense a little bit, though.
it does. And that doesn't make Bob Lazar still not the most interesting story in the world. Like, he's not saying it didn't happen, right? He's just saying that this happened as part of this limited hangout strategy where they knew that they could delete the records at MIT. They knew that they could stigmatize him because of the brothel. They knew that he was this not traditionally trained engineer who just happened to strap a ramjet on the back of a Honda or whatever and meet Edward Teller serendipitously. They knew that they had plausible deniability on all of that stuff. There's a great line in the Oppenheimer movie where Leslie Groves, played by Matt Damon, says, "I didn't hire Oppenheimer in spite of his communist sympathies. I hired him because of them." So you have a top secret program. You want compromise on people. You want to be able to blackmail them. And so I think, that should be taken at face value, in my opinion. And the reason that the story itself can't be taken at face value and needs to be seen through that lens is Lear and Bob Lazar were friends before Bob Lazar got a job at Area 51, S4. And so if you have a top secret program, you're going to do a basic background check. And Lear is going to come up as a guy with a UFO blog, right? And then the CIA is all over the UFO program, right? And he was flying CIA cargo jets. And he says that he disaffiliated in 83. That's bullshit. George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell have talked about how that's BS. And actually disaffiliated much later into the mid-80s or whatever. Why would you continue to pay a guy who is leaking your crown jewel secrets?
So, what do you think? Far-fetched story? Or does the sheer weight of evidence leave you no choice but to believe? Let us know below.